I just noticed my recording button was not pushed yet, and so Ian, I've pushed the recording button, so it is recording again, although we did miss the introduction of you. But I'm just going to turn it over to Ian. And Ian, I want to thank you very much. Ian was also caught up in the cancellation for the snow day, and has agreed to come repeat that for us today in his next chance. But thanks again for your flexibility in doing this and preparing this. And I'll stop talking and turn it over to you.
Okay, no problem. My name's Ian Rattray. I'm the VP of Creative Services with a company called Retail One. And we do everything from strategy, design, manufacturing, installation, the full works. You might hear from my accent. I'm not from around these parts. I'm from Scotland originally. So if I use any funny words like lorry instead of truck, that's why. That's the excuse. So I'm just going to dig in. I'm going to take you guys through a lot of stuff, and at the end we'll have time for questions. So I will just dive in.
Sounds great.
So as we look at this, let me get to the right place here. There we go. What is the one thing that's often overlooked in office design, and it's really one of the most critical things, and that is your guests, the people who are actually coming to your practice. And the big thing about your business that we love, that we think is really unique and interesting, is that you actually have two guest experiences that happen within your practice. You have a clinical guest, a patient that's coming to have an eye exam and to get their prescription, etc. And that there's a certain anxiety that they have when they're coming to do that. Then you also have a retail guest. You have a retail customer. So as one of your guests is leaving the clinical experience and going into the optical experience, they're now a retail customer. So you guys have to be really smart, because you have to be really good at the doctoring stuff. And then you also have to be really good at the retail stuff. And that is just fascinating from our perspective, and makes life kind of interesting for you guys. Anywhere from 50 to 60, some people say it's even higher, percent of your business comes from the optical area. So it's an area that you kind of need to pay attention to. You don't want somebody getting their prescription and the measurements and then leaving the practice and going somewhere else. So where are your guests shopping? There's a lot of buzz about online, and online overall in retail only accounts for 21%. Now it is growing at a fairly fast rate, but basically physical retail is still boss. It's still the main place where people are shopping. And in the eye care business, that number is 4.85, coming up a little bit. But again, most of the sales, most of the business is happening in physical retail. We believe part of that is because of the fit, the touch, the texture, the tactility issue that can only be resolved and only experienced at physical retail. So when you think about designing your office, first of all, you got to get everybody engaged. You've got to get all the key stakeholders, business partners, banks, key staffs, spouses, get everybody involved from the very beginning, so that you really don't get any surprises as you go down the line. Understand the need. How do you want to run your practice? And that's not just in the optical, but obviously in the clinical area as well. Depending on the size of the practice, you might want to go with a pod system in clinical. There's multiple different ways of doing it. So you need to have a fair degree of conversation around that. Understand the market you're going into. Where are you going to be opening the practice? Who are your competitors? What are they doing? And really get a sense of that. Excuse me. By the way, we're hitting allergy season, so I'm going to be coughing a bit. It's driving me nuts. The Claritin's still kicking in. Understand your guests. Who are they? Where are they? What do they do at weekends? What's happening in the local communities? Who is your guest? Who is your customer? Who is the guest? Are you in a suburban area with a lot of families? Are you in an urban area with a lot of single people? What are they looking for? And how do you tailor the practice to their desires and what they're looking for? And then from all of that, you develop the guest experience. What is it that you want to do that's differentiated and unique in your practice that's going to have those guests come to you rather than somebody else? So really what you have to do is to create that kind of new physical reality that supports the guest experience you want to get to. And make sure that the environment reflects it, make sure the communications reflect it, and that really you're going to talk in one voice to your guest base that you're working with. And within all of that, you want to create kind of a unique experience, something again that's you and not somebody else. But you still want it to be convenient, you want it to be flexible, and you want to build trust. You want to build that trust and have people come back. So you want to develop a more personalized, curated guest experience, something again that's going to reflect your personality and what you want to do in the practice that's appropriate for your guest base. You want to allow the guests to engage easily. Just make it very easy for them to come in and kind of engage with the brand how they choose. Like, I work a lot. I love what I do. I get to do the fun stuff. I get to drag the crayon across the page. And but I'm busy. I'm running fast a lot of the time. So when I go to get my eyes done, I want to get in. I want somewhere I can sit in my laptop and work if I have to wait. I'm older. I'm not spring chicken no more. So I want a seat. You know, what type of seat do I want? A comfortable seat would be good. Maybe a cafe table with a chair and I can sit there with my laptop. So allow them to engage with how they want to with the brand, with your brand on that particular day. Also, there's a thing we call touch points. Think about every touch point you have with the guest and make sure you leverage each one. How do you make each touch point special? So the entry, the reception, waiting, clinical, that initial sales consulting, frame selection, finishing up the sale, and also think about when they return to get their new glasses. That's the highlight. That's when you're getting your new car. You're all excited. That's where all the pain's been worthwhile. I'm now getting my new glasses and I look fantastic. Oh, and I can see, which is very nice. So that differentiation is really critical. How do you think about your practice and how do you make it different from anybody else's out there? Because in the marketplace, there's a lot of product parity and definitely a lot of price parity. And that's in local competition and obviously internet sales as well. So you've got to really think about that differentiation and make sure it comes through in your physical experience so the guests recognize it. And ultimately what you're after is you want the guests to regale to their network. You want them going out for a beer that night with their buddy and saying, wow, you got to check this place out. I've never been to one like it. You want to go and have a cup of coffee with a friend or lunch and say the same thing. You want them telling their network how fantastic your practice is. So why is that important to you? Why is that something you want to make sure you do, that advocacy? Well, one of the big questions is whether anybody is going to return or not. One thing we know is that people might forget what you say, they might forget what you did, but they'll never forget how you make them feel. And that's really important, that emotional component of somebody leaving happy, having had a unique experience and having had, you know, an interesting experience that they want to share with their network. And it can be expensive if you don't create that good experience. I mean, there's a whole bunch of people that are very unlikely to shop with you again. There's a whole bunch that won't shop with you. They'll never go back. I had an experience the other day at a store. I will never go back. Only 27% will give you a second chance. So that first impression, having that good experience is really important. And when you think about the interpretation of human experiences, everything from somebody being angry and really pissed off all the way through to somebody being delighted, you know, obviously we don't want to sit around at the DMV. We'd much rather have a much more Disney kind of experience. So we want to be heading more towards that Disney side of things, you know, that nice, happy, delighted experience. And then something else to throw into the mix is experience parity. So essentially within the market you're in, what other retail experiences are your guests having? So again, if you're in New York City, you've got to make sure you're having that experience that matches the other experiences they're having. If you're in rural Tennessee somewhere, that might be a little bit different. So you have to make sure that you make sure your practice is reaching that guest kind of experience parity. How do you do it? Well, you do it deliberately. Good stuff doesn't happen by accident. It's very rare. You need to put a little bit of thought into this. Now, that's really tough. I'm sure as Mike will let you guys know, when you're running a practice and you're in the exam lane and you're doing it, it's very difficult to think about all of these things. But whatever you're doing, you have to do it deliberately. Make sure the guests feel comfortable. You know, they've got to feel safe and welcome when they enter. Make it really easy for them. So when they come in, make it very easy for the guests to see what's happening, what's going on, where do I go, and help guide them through the overall experience. Make it novel, something a little bit different, something that's a little bit new and exciting that you're going to add to the experience. Tactility is really important. One of the other things we love about this particular retail segment is it's one of the few places where people touch your face. And that's a really personal thing. That doesn't happen, really elsewhere very much. So how a frame fits, how it sits, what the frame feels like is really important. And it's a very unique opportunity to really, have the guests experience that tactility. Make it engaging, let the guests envision a better life with the purchase. Make them think, I'm going to have a better life because I come to your practice and you're my doctor and you guys have the best frames and you guys have the best experience. And by the way, I look really cool in this stuff. And then finally, rewarding, have them leave with a fulfilling experience so that they feel happy. They may have dropped several $100 on a new pair of frames. Make it money they were happy to spend because it feels so good. They can see so well. They look so good. Their friends are going to love them with their new frames. So make it a very rewarding experience. So when you look at all of this, what are the benefits that you get from this? What you get is effective differentiation. So if you think about the other guys down the road or online experiences, you're going to be differentiated from them. You're going to be better than them. From that, you're going to get better cross-sell, upsell. Think second frames, think third frame. Weekend activity. Somebody's a cyclist. They need a certain pair of frames and lenses for that. The same with people who fish, rock climbing, all of that type of thing. You're also going to get improved impulse purchase. So again, positioning product in the right place, you might get some eye health products that you can sell. So you're getting that last $20 or that last $30 at the checkout to make the basket size larger. And you're going to have improved guest satisfaction. And what does that give you? That gives you better loyalty. It gives you better advocacy at the end of the day. And that leads to better desire. I want to go here, and then that drives demand. So the loyalty, you guys are my guys. I'm always going to come to you. I love you guys. I'm going to tell my friends about it. That's advocacy. My friends are going to be excited. They're like, man, I got to go check that place out. That sounds really good. That's desire. And that drives demand. That drives more people to your practice. What that also gives you is guests for life, including not just the individual guests, but their families, friends, and coworkers. And they're going to keep on coming back and keep on engaging and keep on spending with you. But it also improves your financial performance. All of that obviously helps you make more money. Now, I don't recommend that you keep your money in a cardboard box. That's generally not a good idea. So I wouldn't suggest that. So here's an example. We developed a program for Vision Source. Hang on a sec, my allergies are killing my throat.
While he's taking a sip, let me just say, guys, that this really highlights that sheet that we got you about defining your dream. A lot of those are questions. The first half probably of those questions are, what does it feel like? What does it look like and feel like when you first walk into a practice? And that's everything that Ian's talking about, is how to create that vision. So it's that's why it sort of circles back to that whole idea and why we start with that process. Mm-hmm. All right, sorry about that, Ian.
That's okay. By the way, you can tell I have kids from my green plastic sippy cup.
Yes, I recognize that cup.
Okay, so what we did for Vision Source, we developed that unique guest experience for them. Oh, let me get back on the presentation. And obviously the environment that needed to be developed to make that successful. And what we did was we placed the guest at the center of the practice. I mean, they're really the heart of everything. Without them, you really don't have anything. And then if we look at that central experience, and of course, being design guys, we come up with fancy names. So we called this the customer salon, not the waiting room. And there's no TV, there's no Oprah in the corner. You want people engaging with the experience around them. And within that customer salon area, we have the concierge, and this has to do with how people are greeted and getting people out from behind the traditional big, what we call the battleship desk, and really pulling the associates from behind their defensible space out onto the floor, actually working with the guests directly. Now, again, the individual who's at this point here, and again, I'm referring back to my kids here, if you think Winnie the Pooh, that's Tigger, that's not Eeyore. That needs to be an associate who has a personality, they're bubbly, they're gonna jump up and, you know, greet people, give them a hug, how are the kids doing, all of that kind of thing. We developed something we call the style bar, and this has to do with the good work that a good optician would do anyway, where essentially they're going to talk to the guest about the shape of their face, they're going to talk about their complexion, they're going to talk about what they do at the weekend, you know, what are your hobbies, what are you up to? All of that can happen at the style bar. And again, that's the kind of thing that people will talk about. They'll say, oh man, they had this thing called a style bar. Talk to me about the shape of my face. People haven't done that before. People will talk to their friends about that. The delivery bar is a very similar thing where I'm now coming back to get my new glasses. I'm really excited. And when you go to that, make it an experience. In this case, we made it almost like a Hollywood experience with a Hollywood mirror. It's very exciting. You could even get to the point like Saturn automobiles used to, where somebody's got their new glasses, people applaud. You know, you can get as cheesy as you want, but, you know, make that an experience. So again, people will talk about that. Man, I went and got my new frames. These guys were, there was a thing, they took pictures of me and posted it up on the web, and there's et cetera, you know, make it into a true experience. And that's something, so again, these are touch points that you want to leverage. And the other thing we did was we actually had in the center of the customer salon, there's a range of seating. I mentioned that before, like sometimes I'm going to want to sit and slump in a chair and just chill for 2 minutes while I wait. Other times I'm going to want to work. So you may have soft seating, you may have cafe tables, you may have high tops, again, depending upon your demographic. But also we kind of wanted people who are getting these unique experiences, style bar, delivery bar, etc. We wanted a little bit of overlap to people who were waiting, hearing those experiences, hearing that excitement. So again, kind of an engagement. People aren't switching off, noisy TV, operas playing, whatever. They're hearing the excitement happening around them and engaging with the product around them as well. So we developed a whole range of different types of elements that would be used in the practice. We actually developed a completely unique merchandising system that has more flexibility than anything else out there. You really want to be able to change up your merchandising every now and then. You know, maybe rods, maybe you know, shelves, things like that. We have these pod elements that can be used in many different ways to merchandise. In general, though, we say keep the merchandise loose. You know, tell stories with the merchandise. Don't just jam a bunch of product in there. This is a video that kind of explains a lot of what we did for Vision
Arriving
Source.
at the office, the patient is greeted not by a receptionist behind a desk, but with a concierge experience like that of a fine hotel.
Hi, welcome to Vision Source. How can I help you today? I have an appointment. Great. If you'll step right over here, we'll get you checked in. Okay, thank you.
The office design of the practice of the future ensures that the patient remains at the center of the eye care experience. Patient data forms have already been completed online, so the patient is free to browse. The bar directs patients to eyewear shapes and colors that best suit their face shape and skin tones, while digital signage informs them of eye health and safety topics. Specialized testing takes place in uniquely designed rooms that showcase the latest in diagnostic technology while maintaining complete privacy for the patient. The practice of the future is centered around the delivery of comprehensive eye health and vision care, utilizing the most advanced clinical instrumentation for thorough and accurate diagnosis, something that Vision Source has championed since its founding. The elite vendor relationships forged by Vision Source make this technology more affordable and accessible to its members. Leaving the examination room with the doctor's recommendation for eyewear, The patient passes strategically stocked and merchandised frame displays and is encouraged to browse the frames on display and the additional styles in the display drawers below. The same frame-on-face technology she used at home is available in the practice of the future and allows her to browse a virtual inventory of eyewear. She can even try on new eyewear while wearing her current eyewear. When it's time for measurements and fitting, our patients sit side by side with the optician, making the process feel collaborative and friendly. Not sure which ones to choose, our patient asks the optician to take a picture of her wearing each one, then sends it to a friend for a second opinion. And soon this visit is complete, but the experience continues, because after receiving a text that her eyewear's ready, she returns.
Welcome back. We have your glasses ready.
To have her new eyewear celebrated in red carpet fashion. And with her permission, her image is added to the social media display in the practice of the future, along with posts from local schools and community organizations. The retail strategies and technology of the practice of the future are here now and available to members of the Vision Source Network. If you're in the Houston area, we invite you to visit our flagship location.
So that video kind of shows overall how the practice would work. I love the way, I love the fact, by the way, that she lives in an obviously corporate environment in the middle bit where she was away. So that shows kind of the, you know, how all of it can come together into kind of a different and unique experience. Oop, I gotta go back on it. And obviously we've done, I think over 100 now of these kind of practices, and a totally different look and feel. And again, this kind of gets back to the uniqueness. This one here was up in Michigan, and you know, he really wanted to go with a very warm feeling practice. This one here was down in Florida, so he loved the Vision Source Gold. He wanted a lot of that in the practice. This one here was actually in West Texas, more of a rural type location. And what this particular doctor did, well, it was almost like a department store kind of design, where he had, you know, the women's section, he had a luxury section, he had the man cave section, he had the kids section, sunwear section, and kind of a central space. And then the other areas came around that space. It's kind of a really cool design. And then down here, just showing some of the functionality that you should be looking for in your fixture system. The ability to change merchandise and have storage and all of that good stuff. Construction costs. What does all this cost? So a little bit on this. This is absolutely, totally the classic, how long is a piece of string? I mean, so many factors can impact this, but I've got a couple of examples that will show you kind of at least how to think. You know, it's a new build renovation. Where is it located? What region is it in? What type of structure? What type of design? Size of office obviously has a big impact. What kind of building code are you going to be working under? Even whether a position, you know, a location is unionized or not has a big impact on construction costs. Standards and features, quality and material, general labor costs, even the experience of the contractor can make a big difference. And then strangely, regional disasters can have a big impact. So if there's a big flood in Florida, a big storm comes through, a lot of construction crews head to Florida because that's where the work is. Well, if you're trying to build something in Oklahoma, you may be in trouble. You know, it might be difficult to get bids. So even natural disasters can have a big impact on construction costs. I did pull this. These are actually 2020 numbers. And again, this business is quite unusual because you are office, you are kind of a retail as well. And then you're also kind of a medical building. You have a lot of sinks, you've got a lot of plumbing going on. That has an impact. And at least I kind of picked the Southeast region. This gives an idea of the range for new build construction. So this is from scratch, site works, everything. So if you're building from scratch, obviously the costs can be up there. I actually have a call into Dr. Beddinghouse. He was one of the chaps in these picture here. He was this guy here. I had a call into him and also Dr. Ford. because they were both new builds, but they haven't managed to get back to me yet. Something about those darn pesky patients.
So Ian, those numbers that you showed us, that's per square foot, isn't it?
That's per square foot, exactly. Yeah, yeah. Now again, that's up there. I mean, that's going from scratch. That's including all the site work and everything.
Right.
The example for this office, Dr. Ellisor. Now, this was a fairly nice office. This was a fairly high-end office, and you'll find this again when you start getting quotes. We got 3 quotes from 3 different contractors, and one of them came in at $320 a square foot, one of them came in at $210, and one of them came in at $166. And that includes everything. I mean, obviously not the optical equipment, but includes all the fixturing, all the wall fixtures, all the construction, everything that had to be done. And this was a totally blank space. There was nothing in here. There was no AC. So it was a complete retrofit. And that was the range of prices we got based on the same documents. So essentially, this guy really wanted the business. This guy, was kind of interested. This guy had no interest in the business. But he was taking the approach that, well, if I get it at that price, sure, I'll do it. In the end, the client chose to go with the lowest bid. And obviously when that happens, you need to have a little bit more supervision, because contractors, particularly on a fixed price contract, they'll try a few funny things. So this means a lot more work for the doc, for the doctor. You've got to stay on top of the project a lot more. But the project turned out really well at that budget. These are 2 from this year. These were, Michael, these were the numbers I was waiting for just before the call. Okay. And essentially, Dr. Fisher, we just opened about a month ago. And he was now both of these are quite small. He was 2,000 square feet, just the optical area. He wasn't doing anything in his clinical. Now, when you're doing clinical also, the overall dollar per square foot comes down because there's less work has to be done in the clinical. And that came in at $120 a square foot. Triangle Vision, we're right in the middle of construction on that, and we'll be finishing up the install of everything on the inside next week. So this one is really fresh. That's 2,700 square feet, and that's everything. That's clinical and the front of house, and that came in at $136. The reason that's a bit higher is there's some specialized stuff going on with some of the finishes that the client wanted to spend a few extra dollars on that. A cleanup, paint up, fix up. I didn't put the number in here, which essentially is coming in new paint, new carpets, and fixing any little things that need fixed. That's maybe 35 to 40 bucks a square foot. So, so that gives an idea of kind of budgets for doing this work. And then top tips. Let's do the top 10. So leverage all guest touch points. Think about where they are, think about the ones that are important to you, and then how do you make it better? How do you make it more special? Something that somebody's going to talk about. No barrel ships. So if you think reception desk, the big desk, people are sitting low, they've got their defensible space, which they never leave. And you end up with what we call the floating head syndrome, which is essentially you walk in and what you see is a couple of people's heads floating across the top of the desk. You really need to be thinking more eye to eye. How do we get the associates sitting higher so they're at the same level as the guest? Maybe make the desk smaller, think about the functionality, how much space do you really need, et cetera, et cetera. Leverage the dyadic relationship. So dyadic essentially means think buddies at a bar. You're standing at a bar with your buddy, you're side by side, you're chatting to each other. A really interesting study done by the University of Southern California about quite a while back, about 15 years now, about how being side by side relating to somebody, it creates much more trust than the traditional over a desk relationship. So think about that dyadic relationship. Provide a range of seating options, no DMV. We do not want to be the DMV anymore, and no TV. So think about, think more Ciao Bella Cafe rather than DMV. Provide refreshments. It's a small thing. It doesn't cost you a ton of money, but it makes people feel good. Less dense product merchandising, think storytelling. So there's a thing called retail blindness where people come in, you just see frames everywhere. There's walls of frames and they all look the same and you can't tell the difference. So think storytelling when it comes to the actual product merchandising. Get the associates on the floor, out of their defensible space. Have them engaging with the guests. Even a simple little thing like crossed arms, it just sends the wrong message. Body language is important. So again, staff training, associate training becomes very important. And perform warm handoffs from clinical to optical. And most people are beginning to do this, but make sure that it's not, just head out that way. Walk somebody out to the clinical, introduce them to another associate, so that they don't just walk out and take the prescription elsewhere. And questions. And I went through that very fast.
Yeah, that was great, Ian. I'd like to ask you a question, if that's okay,
Yeah.
related to Vision Source. So I know that you guys have a deal with Vision Source, and I mentioned that you guys designed my practice, and I am a Vision Source practice. But do I have to be in Vision Source to work with a company like you, or do you guys work with all different kinds of optical?
We will work with other opticals, so you don't have to be Vision Source.
Right, and all that Vision Source branding that's on there, if I decide, and so some of those same cabinets I've got, my space is a lot smaller, but I'm able to use some of that stuff. But if I change brands that I carry in my optical, because there are some of those brands in there, or if I decide to not stay with Vision Source, do I have to replace those cabinets and everything?
No, not at all. No. And for example, the system we did for Vision Source, and by the way, I'll have renderings of your store somewhere if you want me to pull them up.
Well, that's up to you. I mean, I don't think that it's necessary, but it's kind of it's a good example of how you can utilize these, because that same equipment you've got there, or those merchandising, is what we've put in our very, very small space.
Right. Yeah, essentially if you move away from Vision Source, let me pull this to the front. These header graphics here, for example, so to get into a little bit more depth, there's a thing called the communication hierarchy. So what is the messaging within the space? What do you want your guests to see? There's also within retail, there's A, B, C zones. So we have the A zone is at the top, the B zone is in the middle, and the C zone is at the bottom. So if you go to a supermarket, the best brands are going to be in the middle. The less good ones are going to be at the top, and the really not good ones will be at the bottom. So what we do typically in retail is the A zone is communication, the B zone is prime merchandise, and then the C zone is secondary merchandise or storage. Within at the top here, from a communication hierarchy perspective, we're telling people this essentially is saying category. So this is where women, this is men. And not so much women so much, but, guys need to be guided a bit more. And, a guy may not want to end up at a woman's board and be looking at women's frames. So, it's very good for the guys to know, oh, that's where the men's are, that's where I'm going to go. And then underneath that, we have the brand communications. So this is a woman, this is Fendi and Gucci, this is Dior. Now, these are all changeable. So for example, you see for Vision Source, we have this VS up here. That can be changed out. So if you decide, okay, I got too many guys boards and really I have more women shoppers, more women guests coming in, it's very easy to undo. There's little aluminum pucks that you undo and that just lifts off. The same with the brand communication. They're held on with aluminum pucks, and you just take that off. And we actually have that happen quite a lot, Michael, where doctors will change brands, and we're always reprinting and sending out new graphics. Not so much for the categories. They don't change that much, but the brands change maybe every couple of years. People are changing some of the brands. So again, that's part of the design exercise and the manufacturing that we do for Vision Source. It had to be flexible. If you remember, there was that word about flexible early on. Right. It's got to be flexible enough to allow for that kind of change. So,
And you can change the designs of the way your frames look, so it doesn't look like you've got the same, even though the furniture is the same, it looks different, right?
Yeah, this here in this merchandise zone, and really any merchandising systems you're looking for, guys, you need to be thinking about this. How much can it change? Let me open up. Let me find. There's actually another shot that's very good. It kind of shows this. Let me come here. Go here.
Wow, your files are really well organized, it seems.
I try. I'm not sure everybody that works with me would agree, but anyway, you can see here each of these kind of merchandise areas is merchandised a little bit differently. So we have what we call the cubbies, and the cubbies can be graphics, they can be mirrors, you can have product, you can, you know, if you have Dior, you might want to put a Dior scarf or something else in there, you know, to really merchandise it and be more creative. You can mix shelves and rods. We typically kind of avoid rods because it's not the best way to merchandise. But this shows the multiple different ways that each of these merchandise zones can be used, and it's incredibly easy to change. It's just hooks that hook out. And we actually have, for example, when we do a practice, we sit down with the doctors and we go through this. It's a pretty complicated document about categories, brands, what type of presentation do you want in each merchandising zone. And even when we go to install that and we're on site doing the install, it might change. And we see this quite a lot. The doctors or the opticians will go, well, actually, could we have an extra shelf there? Could we take that shelf out? Could we have rods here? And there's change happening even when we're setting the stores. But then over time, to your point, Michael, you want to make sure that you keep it fresh. So at least every, 4 months, 6 months, 9 months, coming in, moving the boards around a bit, just, making it look a little bit different. So again, having a system that gives you that flexibility is really important, whether it's ours or somebody else, obviously.
And I've got one last question. We'll turn it over to the group, see if they got anything. Where are all the magazines supposed to go?
Ideally, no magazines. So
those are a thing of the past. That's a waiting room staple, is a big old stack of outdated magazines, isn't it?
But obviously one should be, and you know this, and everybody knows this, you need to be working your clinical systems so that you don't have people waiting for a long time.
Right.
Keep it flowing, keep it moving. And if somebody comes in and they have their family with them, again, no TV, magazines, no, have them walk around. If they're bored, have them get up and look at some frames, have them kind of have a little wander around, have them engage with the practice, not just sit there. But also today as well, people have phones. So
that's right.
phones
That's right.
Fill that need more than magazine. You're aging yourself, Michael. Magazines. I don't know. What do you like?
I was trying to be funny. I tell you what, I like your slide. We can see your slides there, number 33. That is the best slide. Not that they're all not great, but that word is really, really classic in all of optometry, is being deliberate and what you're doing, and not just. I think you said. Good things rarely accidentally happen, or something along those lines. And I just think that's a great lesson for all of us.
Well, we did a lot of work in automotive, and we would turn up to, dealers. We would work with Ford and BMW and develop the corporate programs, and then we would go out to the dealers and be telling them about the program and ask them what their customer experience was. And they would say, well, I haven't got a customer experience. What do you mean customer experience? And we had to point out, you do have a customer experience. It just may not be a very good one. There is a customer experience. It's just not mindful. It's not deliberate. It's not thoughtful,
Right. Well, that's a great lesson. So, so what we'll do, Ian, this tends to be easier with the group discussion. It's really hard to get a group discussion going, but if you'll stop sharing the screen, and unless you're not finished sharing things with us, then you'll be able to put the audience in full mode, or whatever it's called, the view. You can see, I forget what, gallery mode, and you can see everybody. And if anybody has a question, just jump in and go ahead and ask.
There we go. Stop sharing.
There we go. There you go. You see everybody now?
Mm-hmm.
Ian, okay, good. So guys, jump in if you have a question for Ian. This is a really talented office designer. Has thought of a lot of things, and so if you have a question, this is a good chance to pick his brain a minute.
I have a quick question. I know you mentioned like no TV, but what's your opinion on like background music playing in a practice, and if that's okay, and like what genre to help with the patient experience?
Yeah, having ambient music is not necessarily a bad thing. Genre, you've got to think about it, and it's going to depend on your demographics. And I won't tell the story quite in the full way, but I was doing a project for a client in France. They had multiple locations all over the country. I went to a location in Lyon, and the music that was playing in the store was, they were using really bad words. I actually have the album, but it's not something you would ever play in a public environment. And I pointed out to the district manager that this was blah, 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 and they just said something about young ladies and the police and activity, etc. You get the idea. And he was horrified. And what they had done was they allowed each branch manager to pick the music. So it's obviously got to be appropriate for your audience, you know, for the guests who are coming in. But yeah, music is not necessarily a bad thing.
Courtney, you can't go wrong with John Denver, though, if you're looking for recommendations.
I was listening to that and just laughing away. I haven't heard that song in about 30 years.
Anything else, guys?
I have a question as well.
Okay.
How much liberty do people that work with you have it with choosing their own aesthetic and their designs? And is there, I'm just not really sure how your process works. Is there like almost like packages that they choose from, or is it a very collaborative working with you type of situation?
That varies by client. So the good thing is, doctors who have their own practice, like Michael, they're individual business people. So Michael can do whatever the heck Michael wants to do because it's his money. Some of our clients are, you know, very corporate clients. They have a corporate language, you know, design language, and you've got to stick to that design language. As an example, with Vision Source, they're not kind of a corporate client that dictates standards. That's not their business model. They recognize that all the doctors are individual doctors. So they asked us to develop a standardized program for them with standardized colors and the use of the Vision Source Gold and things like that. Some doctors love it, absolutely love it. Dr. Beddinghouse down in Florida, for his new build, he's got Vision Source Gold everywhere. Other doctors absolutely totally hate it, and there's no Vision Source Gold. So even though, for example, in that design and the design language we developed for Vision Source, it dictates wall colors, floor finishes, etc., etc., I would say at least half the doctors, if not more, do their own thing. You know, the colors change, whatever is on the floor changes, the type of ceiling changes. So it really depends. Like if you're doing your own practice, you can do whatever you want to do. And that changes, you know, it depends on who the client is. Obviously McDonald's, if you're building McDonald's, it's McDonald's. You know, you're not going to personalize that. Right. But if you're doing your own practice, you have really complete freedom to do what you want to do.
That's a good question.
Yeah, yeah, very good.
Anything else, guys?
I don't bite, so any other questions?
Could you possibly give us a ballpark idea of the design cost for a small practice, independent of Vision Source, I suppose?
It really depends. For example, just to talk about Vision Source again, we charge for just the optical, it's $3,000 for optical, and clinical it's $6,000. And we do charge a design fee. There are other companies out there who don't charge a design fee, but you know that you are being charged a design fee. You're paying for it one way or the other. If you're going to a local architect, it can be a lot more than that. If we're designing a practice for somebody who's not Vision Source, we would charge about the same amount, and we wouldn't necessarily charge that much more. But if you go to a local architect, it could be easily, I mean, normally 5–6% of the construction cost, just for the design plus construction drawings on top of that.
Okay. Yeah, it all just seems like a lot of, I don't know, incorporation of different people. So the process would be come to you or a similar firm in person to get a design. And then is it from there ready to all go to the contractor, or how much, I guess, do you still oversee during the construction process?
Again, that depends on the client. You know, we've had clients, you know, within the eye care business who, you know, essentially we'll do a design. We do what we call the design development package. So that gives you materials and, you know, dimension drawings for where walls go, electrical placement. You know, basically, it's not construction drawings, but we take it to a design development level. You would then take that package to either a contractor who has a friendly architect, or to an architect. We typically recommend that by the time we're done, you take it just straight to a contractor. I'm an architect by training. I trained as an architect 300 years ago back in the UK, and I moved into retail about 30 years ago. And so I love architects. I'm an architect myself. The issue that can happen is once you get a design done, and you really want your design done by a retail firm, not by just a local architect, because they don't understand retail. I mean, retail is a very specific business. There's a lot of psychology involved in how you're working with the guests. But once we have a design finished, if you take it to an architect, 90% of the time there won't be any problems. They'll go ahead and do the construction drawings, easy peasy, go ahead and get it built, you're good. 10% of the time, that architect is going to want to stamp their personality on the project, and they'll start changing things. Then you'll incur more costs. So you've kind of, ideally you would take the package from somebody like us from a retail firm directly to a contractor and have their architect do the work, because they tend to be friendly architects. You know, they're just interested in getting the project built. But yeah, typically once we're done with our stuff, you need to get construction drawings done. That then has to go out to bid. Once you get the bids back, you have to assess them, decide which contractor you're going to go with, unless you're a friendly contractor, you know, a brother-in-law's sister or something like that. And then from there, it goes to permit, and then you begin construction on the project. So there are multiple steps. Construction admin is a really good question. It's very good you asked about that, because most doctors end up doing construction admin themselves. Which again, if you have a local friend who's a contractor, you can do the contract admin if it's somebody you trust. It takes time. So you're trying to see your patients, you're trying to run a business, you're trying to do all of the things and live your life and have some family time and stuff like that. So if you do the construction admin yourself, then it can take up a lot of your time. You can hire an architect to do construction admin. We can do construction admin. It really, you know, it can be handled by somebody else, and you pay a fee for that. There's a cost associated. So you have to balance it. You know, how much is my time worth versus how much it's going to cost to have somebody do construction admin. As a good example with the project I showed for Dr. Elliser, I know he wouldn't mind if I told you the story. We were not hired to do construction admin. They were going to do it themselves, but we happened to be in Texas a lot. We were doing a lot of projects around Houston and Dallas. So every time during construction, I happened to be near Texas, I dropped into Houston. I also happened to live in Houston in the past and have lots of friends there. So I didn't mind. I got to hang out with friends for the weekend. One example of the kind of thing you have to watch for, we had LED lighting specified. You want to go with LED lighting. A couple of different ways of doing it. One way is very expensive. Another way is it's quite a bit less expensive. But you really want to go with LED lighting, and he had 14-foot ceilings, so he had to go with LED lighting. So we specified the mid-level LED solution, which is an existing lamp, $20. There's a billion of them out there, which is the holder of the bulb, and then an LED bulb goes into that lamp. That's the cheaper way of doing LED lighting. And well, it turns out I happened to be on site, and there was a whole bunch of MR16s all over the place, which is another light source. There's a little tiny LED light. Not LED, sorry, a halogen light. basically old technology. And I happened to see all these MR16s lying around in boxes. So I asked the contractor, what are these MR16s doing there? Oh, I just swapped them out. So instead of doing the LED lamps that would last 10 years, would not need to be changed in 10 years. They're a little bit more expensive, but the life cycle economics are tremendous on these LED lights. He had swapped them for MR16s because he was on a fixed price contract. The MR16s have a 2,000-hour life, which in a retail environment is 3 months. So that meant that every 3 months, Dr. Elser and his staff would be climbing up a ladder to change 53 lights. It's just crazy. I mean, the health and safety, people falling off ladders, the blah, blah, blah.
Plus they get hot.
They get very hot. They really kind of put a lot of heat into the space as well. So the contractor had swapped that out, hoping that nobody would notice that he'd changed from the LED lamps, which are $15 each, to the MR16 lamps, which are $2 each. So, you know, that's the kind of thing that can happen that you need to keep an eye on during construction. He was not a happy camper that I turned up.
Yeah, I bet he wasn't.
They went and told tales to Glenn and said, you need to come and join this conversation. So I'm lucky I made it out of Houston alive that weekend.
And a lot of things like that happen in a project like this, and sometimes you catch them and sometimes you don't. But Ian, listen, we need to wrap up, but I sincerely appreciate your time, and I'm sure there'll be some follow-up questions. And if it's okay, I'll share your contact information that you and I have been talking about via email, and so that they can reach out to you if they have any other questions. If that's okay with you.
And would you want me to send a presentation to you so you can?
Oh, that would be even better. If you're willing to share that, we will, if you send it to me, then we'll upload it to their class and they can have access to that as well.
It's going to be a big PDF, so it'll be a big file, but I apologize in advance.
That's great. That's great. There's lots of good stuff in there.
Okay.
All right. Well, listen, guys, thank you very much to Ian. We sure do appreciate you. And thanks for all of your flexibility and rescheduling and getting here with us. This was a really, really great presentation. Thanks a lot.
Take care, guys.
All right, thank you. Bye-bye.